Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh everyone, I'm Aisha Rosalie and today I'm going to speak about my experience working in Bollywood as a British girl, white girl, as a foreigner working in Bollywood. And this is all before I became Muslim. I just want to point out that it's very important that you guys know this before I became Muslim. And when somebody converts to Islam, it's never just one thing. Sometimes it is, but it's never just one thing that brings you to Islam. Normally it's lots of different things happening simultaneously or around the same time that bring you to Islam. And for me, Allah put lots of different things in my life, throughout my life actually, even since I was a child, that allowed me to eventually accept Islam. And when I became Muslim, I was working in Bollywood at the time. I actually became Muslim during COVID, so I wasn't actually working on set, but the last job that I'd done before I became Muslim was working in Bollywood. So the years leading up to me becoming Muslim and everything, I was working in Bollywood, and it's actually a bigger part of the story than I realized. I've been thinking a lot about my past, what I was doing, where I was going, and I realized my work in Bollywood played a huge role in that. I started working in Bollywood. When I say Bollywood, I mean Bollywood film shooting in the UK. That's what I did first before I went out to India for a bit. But in the UK is where I started working on Bollywood films. So lots and lots of Bollywood films shoot in the UK. And when I first came back from America, so I was living in LA because I wanted to be an actress. So I studied acting in LA. And when I came back to UK, I was struggling for acting work, and I had a friend who was an extra in Bollywood. So if you don't know what being an extra is, you're kind of like this standing part in the background. You move maybe sometimes, which is kind of fun, but apart from that, you're just kind of there in the background. It really is no acting involved. It's just very simplistic. At first I was very tentative because I didn't know anything about Bollywood. I didn't know anything about India. I was very blind to lots of different cultures. When I first started working in Bollywood, it was really difficult because Indian film sets work very differently to British American film sets. So it was a lot to learn. And I didn't know a lot of the stars at the time. And I kind of enjoyed doing the extra work because it was very flexible. They didn't organize anything, whereas in like British or American shoots, they would organize everything, so you'd be booked like months in advance. Whereas with Bollywood, like literally the night before, they would just book all the extras. It was very like more unorganized and more freelance. So if I wasn't working and I wanted some extra money, I would just go along. The night before, I'd get a message saying looking for extras. They would say looking for white girls. They would actually say that. And I would be like, okay, that's me, and I would go along. And eventually this went on for a while. So much so that I started actually wanting to learn about Bollywood. So I started watching Bollywood films. I started learning about who these actors were I was meeting and things like that. And I became really into it. I started really liking being around Indian people, and I started learning the language, and I started really being interested in the whole thing, to be honest. And then it moved on from extra work, and then I did some smaller roles. So they would hire like very silly roles for white girls. You don't get any good acting roles for white girls. It's things like main character's ex-girlfriend in London or whatever. It's very stupid roles. I started doing those with a couple of lines here and there, even lines in Hindi and some other regional languages sometimes. And then I started moving into production, so I started working behind the camera. So this is where things started to get more serious, because when you work behind the camera, you will work on films for longer. So you'll work on a film for like a month or like a couple of weeks. When I first started, it was a couple of weeks, and then it moved on to film shoots that were like months long. And I was even working in South Indian films as well, and Tamil stuff. And I enjoyed production more because I enjoyed like being part of the crew, and I enjoyed actually interacting with people properly. And this is when I really properly got to meet like the Bollywood stars and interact with them and see what they were like as people. Before, I never really knew. So that was an interesting experience. What happened to me when I started working in Bollywood was quite a lot of negative things. The first thing is I became increasingly obsessed with appearance. So I was doing more Googling on plastic surgery. I was online all the time. I was always like Googling plastic surgeries, and I was feeling really insecure about myself, which is weird because as a white person you get a lot of compliments. They really praise white skin a lot, as you guys probably already know. So I would get a lot of compliments, but I would always feel like I'm not enough despite those compliments, which is very strange. And I think because the industry itself is so vain, so much vanity. I mean, we would be shooting scenes and there would be like actresses and even actors as well holding up mirrors, like to make sure, constantly like holding up mirrors all the time, and everything has to be perfect, and so much vanity that I just became engulfed in it, and I really started to obsess over looks. And I really started to think that the way you looked was one of the most important things in the world. And that was working in Bollywood that did that to me. That's one of the main things, was looks. Another thing is status. So when you work on these film sets, yes, these divas are real. These divas are real, and they are not just women, they are men. A lot of the Bollywood stars, I worked with a lot of Bollywood stars like Ranveer Singh, Anil Kapoor, Deepika Padukone, John Abraham, Katrina Kaif, I think her name is, Katrina Kaif, so many. There's so many stars I worked with. I worked with a lot of Bollywood actors' sons and daughters who were doing their first movies, and to be honest, some of these actors, without naming names or backbiting or gossiping, some of these actors were genuinely nice people. And some of these actors were genuinely really disgusting people. Honestly speaking, very disgusting people. The way they would treat people, the way they would shout at people, the way they would throw things. Oh my God, it was awful. So on sets, we had this issue where I knew I was okay as a white foreigner. They're not gonna say anything to me, which makes it even worse. But there were people on set who were maybe working lower down, who were from India, who were from a lower caste or whatever, who they would literally shout at, who they would throw things at. It was so scary as an outsider to see this, to witness this. And that really shaped me as well. I started, I guess I started really like leaning into white privilege more. And at first when I saw the behavior, it was so disgusting. I hated it. But I think over time I sort of found myself being more lenient and accepting towards the behavior. Alhamdulillah, I never behaved like that. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. But I became more lenient and accepting, and more like, oh, this is normal. This is how people behave, which you should never be. You should always stand up for the oppressed. And there were a lot of oppressed people on those film sets. So honestly speaking, that's another thing. So I became obsessed with looks. I became more lenient towards oppression. And I think the third thing is that I just found myself doing more haram things. I mean, I lived in LA for like 3 years, and I did way less haram than what I did when I was working on Bollywood film sets. There is a lot that goes on, and a lot of really disgusting things that I'm not going to go into. But yeah, I found myself doing more haram, which really broke me. It really broke me. And that's a really important part of my convert story, is these three things. The Bollywood industry led me to India. India was my first properly foreign country, in the sense that it was a country that wasn't white people. So it was my proper first country where I was in a country that wasn't white people. And that was a really good experience for me, because I actually got to learn about other cultures there. I stayed in like a Muslim area while I was in Mumbai as well, so that was really good. I met lots of Muslims. Even on Bollywood film sets, there's loads of Muslims. So when I was in India, I got to really experience a different side of the world. I got to see true poverty. Like the poverty you see in the UK is nothing like the poverty you see in India. I got to see true poverty, what a lot of people in the world go through on a daily basis. And I got to be around different types of people. I got to be around Hindus, I got to be around Muslims, and I got to experience different cultures, different religions. And that really helped shape me in a positive way. So when looking back on this experience, I see some really interesting things. I see how Allah broke me. He broke me in three different ways of being obsessed with looks, of being leaning into oppression, and to doing haram things in a way that I didn't like myself anymore. So he really broke me in that way. He really turned me into somebody I didn't like, that I was morally against. And then he allowed me to go to India, where I got to meet different cultures and be open to different experiences. And with those two things, it really allowed me to accept Islam. Because when I came back from India, I went to Turkey within a month, I think. It was quite soon after India that I went to Turkey. And obviously Turkey is where I discovered Islam, where I found Islam. And it's really important, that part of my story, because I could have taken a very different path at that point. I could have carried on down this path of Bollywood fame or whatever, which for a white girl who speaks Hindi, it's actually not that difficult, and it requires a lot of negative things. Like the girls that get into Bollywood these days, they're required to do a lot of negative things on a daily basis. So alhamdulillah, that wasn't the path I went down, but that easily could have been the path that I'd gone down. But Allah took me on a different path. When Allah took me to Turkey, Allah showed me a different side of living. He showed me a side of living where you don't have to worry about the way you look, where you don't have to be concerned about status and chasing success or fame or any of these things, and a different side of life where you can just relax and feel happy being in your own skin and being around God and being close to God. And I've spoken in my videos so many times about the lessons I've learned becoming Muslim. They're huge, they're numerous. There's so many. I could make this video into an hour-long video talking about all the amazing things that happened to me once I found religion, once I found Islam. But at the end of the day, I just became a lot happier and a lot calmer and a lot smarter. I wasn't chasing things that were destructive anymore. That whole experience of what I went through is really important to where I am today. And we see lots of actresses leaving Bollywood nowadays and finding Islam, which is amazing, because the Bollywood industry sadly is getting more corrupt, it's getting more sexualized, it's getting more oppressive, it's getting more the women are objectified more. It's just getting worse. Not to say that there's not positive, because there are positive films that are made. Genuinely, there really are. But a lot of these big commercial films, they're just not positive, and they just corrupt the mind. They make you think that in order to be happy, you need to have all these things that just don't make you happy, and it's just really corrupting the younger generations and my generation as well. But yeah, inshallah, I really want to shed a light on my experience working in Bollywood, what happened, and that's my story. Thank you guys for listening. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah.